Good afternoon guys, how are you all doing? Welcome back to Historical Horses. Before I get into today's video, I've been meaning to do this for the last few videos. If you do enjoy this channel and enjoy the videos that I put out, please hit the subscribe button, like, comment. It helps so much with growing the channel and the YouTube algorithm. And I read somewhere that it makes a really big difference if the person doing the videos remembers to tell people to hit the subscribe button, because otherwise they just won't do it. And I know that's true for me when I'm watching YouTube videos, and unless someone in the video reminds me to like and subscribe, I tend to forget. So that is exactly why I'm doing this. Right, enough of that. So today's video, do you know what, I can't even remember how I found out about it. I suspect I was researching something else and it sort of popped up, and as always, it sort of intrigues me and I want to find out more, and I start researching it and I think, oh, this would make a great video. Now, the only downside about today's video is there are very few images to go with it. And in fact, the topic of today's video, I don't even have an image of this lady, which is such a shame. But if you do Google her name, you will see one, because a couple of years back, this was in the press a little bit. I didn't hear anything about it, but having now researched her story, it's really interesting. And actually what she did was a huge step for women. So let me tell you more. So today we're talking about Ellen Challoner, and she was the first woman to be granted a permit by the Jockey Club to train racehorses, and this was in 1886. And what makes this even more remarkable is it was 80 years later, and after a High Court case, that women were finally, legally by the Jockey Club, allowed to train racehorses and it to be a profession. 80 years later. So actually it's quite a recent event that women have been allowed to train racehorses kind of legally under the Jockey Club rules. I mean, women were training racehorses before that, but it was often behind their husband's name or kind of slightly in secret. How bonkers is that? So I think we can very much say that Ellen Challoner was a trailblazer for women in racing. Ellen was born in 1846 in Middleham, North Yorkshire, and she was born into a very strong racing family. John Osborne Sr., Ellen's father, was a jockey, and then he became a trainer. And Ellen's brother, John Osborne Jr., was an incredible jockey and very successful. John Osborne Jr. was hugely successful, having wins at Ascot Gold Cup, the Epsom Derby, the Epsom Oaks, and many, many more major races. Ellen was one of 11 children in the Osborne family. Aged 19, Ellen married Tom Challoner. Now, Tom was a jockey, and he was actually the apprentice at Ellen's father's stable, which was Ashgill Stables. Tom and his brothers moved to the Osborne family's Ashgill Stables when he was just 13 years old. So you realise that actually him and Ellen had known each other for quite some time before they decided to get married. Tom had a successful career as a jockey, and him and Ellen went on to have 8 children, 7 boys and 1 girl, and many of their sons were great jockeys as well. Tom Challoner Jr. was Ellen and Tom's eldest son, and he was probably the most successful in racing out of all of their children. When Tom Challoner Sr. retired from racing, he took up training, and the family moved to Osborne House Stables. Tom Challoner Sr. had success in training racehorses, but sadly, just aged 46, he passed away from an illness. This, of course, left Ellen in quite a position. She obviously had all of Tom Challoner Sr.'s racehorses that were in training. She had 8 children. Now, some of them were obviously at an age where they were already working and so on, and the majority of the children were sort of working in the family business on the race yard. But can you imagine suddenly being left with a lot and sort of trying to work out what to do next? And in fact, what she did decide to do next was to approach the Jockey Club to try and get a permit so that she could train the racehorses and continue on her husband's work. I've already said in this video, Ellen was granted a permit so that she could continue to train these racehorses. And there's some interesting sort of things that go along with this. It does show in newspaper records for when the horses were actually out at the races that Ellen was sort of training under her son's name, her eldest son, Tom Challoner Jr., because this was still a time when women sort of weren't allowed to be in this profession. You know, it wouldn't have been seen right to see her training racehorses. However, in a census, it does actually state Ellen's profession as a racehorse trainer, which is a big deal. I mean, it's quite possible she was the first woman to have her name put down in a census as a racehorse trainer, and that was in 1891. So these are big steps that were being taken at this period of time. Ellen trained from 1886 to 1894. And in 1893, she had 17 horses in training. So she must have been doing something right, because obviously she still had clients. Now, this would have been quite a big deal for these clients, that they were having their racehorses kept and trained by a woman. Because some people were obviously absolutely fine with it, but there certainly were other people who were not so fine with it. And yes, she had her sons alongside her, and her eldest son was probably doing most of the racing on these horses, but still, you know, there'd have been a lot of talk about it. In 1893, she also had her biggest success, and this was with a filly called Jersey Lily. Now, Jersey Lily won the Triennial Stakes at Royal Ascot with none other than Ellen's eldest son, Tom Challoner, on board. Can you imagine what a feeling that must have been to have had such success at Royal Ascot, but also to have your son riding? The Triennial Stakes are now known as the Jersey Stakes. So it also gives her the title of the first woman to train a winning racehorse at the royal meeting. That was such a huge achievement for Ellen and her family and her racing stables. Can you imagine the talk at that Royal Ascot meeting, knowing that a woman had trained a winner there? Now, there were probably plenty of people who were really admiring what Ellen was doing and what she was achieving. But there's also plenty of people who really didn't like it. They didn't like a woman coming into the racing industry, a woman training racehorses. It wasn't her place. She shouldn't be there. And interestingly, and now this is a rumour, so who knows if it actually was true or not, but when her son was racing, and it may well have been in that Royal Ascot race, and he obviously won, the jockey that came second actually put up a complaint at the fact that the winning horse was trained by a woman, and that jockey was an apprentice to a woman. What a sour grape he must have been. This was a proper objection. You know, it had to be raised by the Jockey Club, but thankfully it was overturned. It's thought that Ellen gave up racing and training after a fire broke out at the stables. Though Ellen had given up training racehorses, she was very much part of the racing scene for the rest of her life and adored the sport. And supposedly she last rode on Newmarket Heath aged 96. I do hope that's true, because that's remarkable if she did. What a woman. Ellen, in fact, outlived all her children, which I can't really imagine. She must have had a lot of heartache throughout her life to have obviously buried her husband and then to have buried all her children as well. I mean, she lived to a phenomenal age, but still, she went through a lot in life. And the reason that Ellen's story has only really come to light recently is because her family started a campaign to get a headstone for her, because it turns out she was actually in an unmarked grave and her story hadn't been told. It wasn't really being remembered at the fact that she was the very first woman to get a racing permit from the Jockey Club, and this was a story that needed to be told. So her family started a campaign. They reached out to the Jockey Club to see if they would support them, which they did, and Ellen and actually Tom Challoner as well have now got headstones over their grave. And it's lovely that this story of Ellen Challoner is sort of now out there, because before that, like I say, it wasn't really spoken about. Not many people knew about it, but now people do know that she was the first woman racehorse trainer. And yeah, it's a remarkable story, isn't it? An amazing achievement. And like I say, 80 years later, until it was kind of officially allowed for women to train racehorses as a profession, which is ludicrous, I think. But what a story of Ellen Challoner. I hope you enjoyed that, guys, and I'll see you again very soon.